A new Netflix TV show has sparked a nationwide, nay international conversation about toxic masculinity, incel culture, and the influence of the online manosphere on young men and boys. So what is this show? How accurate actually is it? And why has it caused such a range of strong reactions online? We have all the info you need, as always, on Scroll Deep, the show that keeps up with internet nonsense, and sometimes internet adolescence, so you don't have to. Adolescence is a Netflix show that tells the story of how a family's world is turned upside down when their 13-year-old son Jamie is arrested for the alleged murder of a teenage girl who goes to his school. It was created by Stephen Graham, probably one of our national treasures at this point. It was also written by Jack Thorne, a man who writes like 100 award-winning TV dramas a day, apparently. And it takes a look at the influence of incel culture and sort of how Andrew Tate-esque figures can radicalize young men, how that influence can drive them to make terrible, terrible decisions. And the series is only 4 episodes long, but each hour-long episode is shot entirely in one take, one unbroken take. They're not doing hidden cuts or anything. A bit like every episode of Scroll Deep. People don't realize this. We sometimes cut to close-ups and different shots, but make no mistake, we do all of this in one unbroken take. And if I stumble for even a second, we start again. I've never stumbled, luckily, even once. So the story of Jamie Miller and the crime he's accused of, it's not based on one specific incident or any specific person, but according to Stephen Graham, it was inspired by a series of devastating news reports. He said, quote, "I read an article a while ago about a young boy who stabbed a young girl to death. And then I saw a piece on the news about 4 months later. Again, it was about a young boy who stabbed a young girl to death. And they were at opposite ends of the country. And I just thought, why? What is it? What's happened in society today where this kind of thing is happening not once, not twice, but 3 or 4 times now? I just thought that would be an interesting thing to look at." And with this show, a star is born. From the Lows, a young boy by the name of Owen Cooper. He plays the 13-year-old boy Jamie, and he was 14 at the time of filming, and he had never acted professionally before this role. But he was chosen, plucked from obscurity, and then all of a sudden he was doing these massive hour-long one-take episodes where he had like most of the dialogue, and you got this whole crew of adults staring at you, completely aware that if you make the slightest mistake, everyone would have to start again. And quite annoyingly, he did a perfect job. This child is so much more talented than any of us will ever be, and that's fine. I'm not bitter about that. In fact, his next role will be in Wuthering Heights with the co-star Margot Robbie. I've heard of her, so that's good for him. He's also playing young Jacob Elordi, which is maybe the biggest compliment anyone can ever receive. You look like Jacob Elordi, but younger. So how big is Adolescence? Well, by any metric, I would say it's been a runaway hit. It's got 24.3 million views in its first 4 days of availability, roughly what Mr. Beast does in about 4 minutes. So it's a good world we live in. It's the #1 show on the English TV list in the UK, and it's the most streamed series in 71 countries. And when we say everyone in the UK is watching this show, we really do mean everyone. It is really capturing the conversation. Even the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, he says he supports a campaign that Stephen Graham's been pushing to have the show shown in Parliament and also in schools. Now, we'll get to the reaction in a sec, but one group of people that have really been speaking up about this is Andrew Tate fans, because Andrew himself is literally name-checked in the show. I actually did a bit of a double Tate when he was mentioned in the show, because it's kind of crazy to hear Andrew Tate mentioned in like a mainstream Netflix show. They mentioned him during discussion in episode 2 at Jamie's school. They're basically trying to explain incel stuff to other adults, and so they kind of name check him as a way to give context. None of this is spoilers, by the way. It's not really like a plot-based show. It's much more a character piece. But in the last episode, the dad also says, "Hey, this guy come up on my phone and he was talking about masculinity," and I was like, what is this? And that's obviously like a reference to Andrew Tate as well. So let's ask, how accurate is this show in terms of the sort of internet manosphere stuff? It's uncanny to hear a show like this mention things like incels, red pills, the manosphere. Even though that stuff is kind of everywhere these days, I found that the media has been very slow to address this stuff or even mention it. I guess because they don't want to give it oxygen, which I do respect, but at this point you do kind of have to address this stuff because it is everywhere, and unfortunately it is poisoning people's brains. And this show really delves into it in an interesting way. It kind of does the overt things of being like, what is the red pill? But it also delves into some of the actual mindset. Like when we see Jamie and actually, you know, he sits down with a psychiatrist and speaks to her, he starts talking about like, he's so ugly, no one could ever love me because I'm ugly, and that, you know, women only date 20% of men, and all of this is like really intense incel stuff. Like he is completely deluded into thinking that he's like unlovable, and this is the kind of nonsense that is propagated by these people who at the end of the day just hate women and are using insecurity and these other things to just try and get other men to hate women with them. There was also some discussion in the show about emojis and secret codes in emojis. and I do want to push back on this a little bit because I feel like a lot of people, perhaps older people, have looked at this show and gone, the main message I'm taking from this is that all emojis are secret death messages, and that's not necessarily correct. In the show, it name checks some emojis. It's like the dynamite emoji represents the red pill, the 100 emoji represents the conspiracy that 80% of women only want 20% of men or whatever. Yes, in some instances that may be true, but sometimes you just want to keep it 100. If your friend is wearing an outfit that's on fleek, you may want to just comment 100. It doesn't always necessarily mean, if you're a parent right now and you're just seeing some emojis, it's probably not going to be that stuff. It's good to be aware of it, but it probably actually isn't going to be this stuff. I've been seeing these things from like This Morning and all these kind of morning TV shows that are like, every emoji actually means death. And I don't know that's true. I like the idea that emojis have secret messages. It's like, isn't that the whole point of emojis? It's a symbol with a meaning. Did you know that 2 dots with a half circle underneath actually means smiley face? But I should make you aware of some of the other emojis that they didn't talk about on the show. Obviously, there's the tennis ball emoji. That means this is the best possible thing. I love this thing. I guess it's tennis. Now, there are a lot of people who have just willingly or unwillingly completely misunderstood this show. I saw a few tweets from people going like, oh, I was annoyed there wasn't a twist at the end. And it's like, bruh, what show were you watching? Like, it's very clear what the situation is from episode 1. One person tweeted, he was in his room. We thought he was safe. That's a quote from the show. And that's the point of the show. Parents thinking their kids are safe, but the dangers are on their phones and laptop and not being aware of what they're consuming. It was never going to be a whodunit show. Naturally, also, with this being the most annoying time to be alive in history, it's not the worst time to be alive, but it is the most annoying time to be alive in history. There is a group of people who will look at any situation and ask, can I make this racist? And so a small but vocal subsection of people online have looked at this moving exploration of toxic masculinity and gone, why is the kid white? Why is a white kid using a knife? Of course, completely missing the point of the show. It's not a show about knife crime. You know, in a way, the way he murdered her doesn't really matter. Obviously it matters because it's brutal, but it's more about the fact he killed her, why he killed her, what drives young men to kill women. It's not about knife crime. Also, you're gonna look me in the eye and tell me that white kids don't commit crimes, that white boys don't stab people. That's just instantly disprovable. Quote, the people moaning about the race of the kid in Adolescence are completely missing the message of the series. It's not about race, it's about incel culture of regular kids who are radicalized on their computer, not knife crime, which is mainly associated with gangs in London. To me, this feels like kind of classic whataboutism, where people, probably the people who need to hear the message of this show the most, let's be honest, feel confronted by it, and so they basically need to decide it's bad. They need to give themselves a reason to dismiss it, because maybe it's too close to home. I think what is great about the show, and that I really give it credit for, is that it doesn't have any easy answers to anything. Everything is sort of inconclusive. The parents in the final episode, they analyze it. They're like, were we bad parents? Again, this isn't really spoilers, but the dad's like, oh, you know, I tried to make him play football and he didn't really like football. And it's like, they're trying to come up with these reasons, but at the end of the day, what the boy has done is so extreme. You can't really trace any of these lines, right? None of it's clean and rounded off. You know, the girl that he kills, they're like, oh, was she bullying him because she called him an incel? And even in the show, there's like a sort of incel guy who's like, I'm on his side, she was bullying him. But at the same time, there's another young boy in the show who is also very clearly getting bullied, and he's not committing murder. You know, it's all a bit messy and it's all a bit unclear, but I think that messiness is great because it's realistic and it gets conversations going, and it means that you can't just kind of go, oh, it was this, and then move it aside. You have to kind of confront this stuff. And I think that's why it might be useful to show it in schools, because it inspires debate. I think getting it in front of older people, but also in front of young kids themselves, is probably quite a good thing. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Do you think it will lead to any meaningful change? What steps do you think can actually be taken to sort of de-radicalize a lot of these young men? I mean, certainly a lot of the blame does lay at the feet of platforms. I mean, the YouTube pipeline, you can watch one Minecraft video and YouTube's like, you want to see some Ben Shapiro? It's like, why? No. You also have to ask, like, is the internet the cause or is it a symptom of a wider problem? I think it kind of has a symbiotic relationship where these kind of hateful thoughts were always there, but the internet has just allowed them to be like broadcast in a mass way now, whereas before you would be like a kind of niche freak to believe in this stuff. They've been able to mainstream it using the internet. So even if the internet isn't necessarily the cause, it is the #1 delivery system for all this stuff. and that needs to be curbed. Anyway, let me know in the comments down below your thoughts about the thing. Have you watched the show? Also, if you've watched the show from a place that's not the UK, what's your approach to it? Does it still hit hard for you? Is it still applicable? And now for the secret question for people who made it to the end. Who do you think is by and large a net positive, healthy male role model? Bob Mortimer is a nice guy. He just tells silly stories and then he goes home. Let me know in the comments down below. And also, of course, a role model for men who isn't necessarily a man. Doesn't have to be a man. Could be an animated dinosaur. Shout out Barney, man. I'm Benedict Townsend. Tennis ball emoji, tennis racket emoji. Bye.